The creatures did not rush their invasion. From the deep shadows of the forest, they watched and waited. Hidden among the ancient oaks, their oily forms were barely visible, shifting like liquid between the trees and the fog. They observed the village for many nights, learning the soul of the place. They knew when the hearth fires flickered into ash and when the heavy weight of exhaustion finally forced the villagers into sleep. They were not hunting blindly. They were waiting for the perfect moment to unravel the piece. The first signs appeared as a subtle, creeping damage. Fences were broken during the night by a strength that was not human. Livestock scattered into the dark, and by the time the villagers realized the danger, the attackers were gone. Nothing was taken cleanly. This was a calculated test to see how the community would respond to an invisible threat. When the creatures finally entered the village, they moved like smoke. They slipped through fog-filled streets, appearing and disappearing at will. Torches were raised too late, their light weak against the encroaching dark. Weapons were grabbed by trembling hands, but the villagers were striking at shadows. The creatures did not bleed or react like living opponents. Chaos replaced order in a matter of minutes. The creatures did not hesitate. Villagers were overwhelmed in their doorways or dragged toward the forest, their voices swallowed by the mist. The resistance collapsed before it could organize. Those who escaped ran without direction, driven by a primal fear. The forest, once a resource for the village, was now a hostile fortress for the invaders. Those who fled into the trees found themselves hunted through the undergrowth. They barely escaped back to the square, their spirits broken. A siege mentality took hold. Survivors barricaded their doors, pushing furniture against every opening. They sat in the dark, listening to the scratching of claws against stone. The attacks returned night after night until survival replaced every other routine of life. Fields were left untouched, and children were hidden underground. By morning, the village was exhausted. Damaged houses stood silent, and tools lay rusting in the dirt. Survivors gathered without speaking, wondering if the next night would be their last. They adapted because they had no choice. Guards were posted during the day, and every lock was checked twice. Fear had become a daily routine. Then the attack stopped. One night passed in total silence. Then another. No shadows moved in the streets, and even the dogs remained still. This quiet was not comforting. It felt heavy, like the stillness before a landslide. At the forest's edge, the tracks told a new story. Claw marks ended abruptly at a jagged line in the soil, as if an invisible wall had been erected. Beyond that point, the ground was undisturbed. The monsters had found a boundary they refused to cross. The hunters were now the ones recoiling in fear. Deeper in the forest, the creatures were restless. They gathered in agitated packs, turning on each other with sudden aggression. They moved like prey, sensing a predator they could not see. The forest itself began to change. Fog pulled inward, thickening around ancient roots, and all natural sounds disappeared. The land no longer felt haunted, it felt claimed. Panic spread through the creatures. They fled without coordination, colliding with trees and abandoning their territory. They ran as if the forest itself rejected them. The woods were left silent and empty, waiting for a new master. Into that silence came a presence. Black Annis arrived not with violence, but as a correction. As the lesser threats were driven out, her immense presence folded inward, receding into a form that could walk among humans. One creature did not escape in time. Separated from its pack, it broke from the forest and ran into the village in a blind panic. Behind it, there was no frantic chase, only the steady, inevitable walk of Black Annis. She followed the creature at a rhythmic pace, her presence bending the fog around her. The creature forced its way into a wooden granary, seeking a dark corner to hide. She followed it inside. The structure shook as the creature scrambled upward, breaking stairs and tearing at beams. Black Annis ascended without urgency, unaffected by the collapsing space. She moved with the weight of a mountain. In the attic, the creature resisted weakly. Black Annis restrained it without haste. Under her grip, its shadowy form lost cohesion, collapsing inward until nothing remained. There was no spectacle, only a quiet and final resolution. When she emerged, the village felt different. The fires died down, and the air settled into a peaceful chill. The weight that had pressed on the villagers finally lifted. From behind their windows, the people watched her in silence, unsure whether to approach or retreat. The remaining creatures watched from the distant hills. They did not challenge her. They turned and fled into the deep wild, abandoning the region completely. Black Annis stood in the square for a moment longer, then turned toward the hills. In the days that followed, the village rebuilt. Life resumed cautiously. Then, the villagers began to construct something new. A statue made of stone and bone was placed at the forest's edge. It was not for worship, but a marker, a reminder of the night the balance was restored. When the statue was completed, the village held a festival. Music returned, and the story of the Blue Hag was told again and again. But Black Annis was not there. She watched once from a distant hill, unseen, observing a place that no longer needed her. Then she turned back toward the forest and disappeared into the quiet. The village would never see her again. She existed only to correct what should not be. When the world was balanced, she left. And the silence she left behind is the only warning the world needs.